For over 15 years, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsberg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now, the official sports betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets, starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. And for all those joining us live, wherever you are in the interweb, good morning and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show presented by our friends at Play Now. Good morning, Ezra Ginsberg. It's been a minute since I've been on an Illegal Curve broadcast. So how you doing, buddy?
I'm great, Dave. It's great to have the two best members of IC back together. No Drew. I mean, we're going to have obviously tons of mic time, which is going to be great. No, I'm doing good. I actually, we usually have, for those who don't know, we usually have a little, pre-show chat for 5 to 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. I forgot to mention, Dave, I almost didn't make the show this morning. I dropped my kids off at my sister and my brother-in-law's, and I completely wiped out on their front steps, their concrete steps. And my behind was hurt a little bit. So it could have been a lot worse. I thought it was going to be, something where I was going to have to, slowly get up and maybe have to sit there for a few minutes, but I'm okay. So that happened. Just be careful out there because I imagine, Dave, you've already noticed it's super icy out there with all these fluctuations in temperature. It was like +2 or something yesterday. Yeah. I just wanted to get that in there. I almost didn't make the show today because I wiped out on my behind. But yeah, it's great to see everybody in the chat. Great to be back talking Jets. We've got a big Saturday night game tonight between the Jets and Senators, and we're going to have lots of home cooking. Next 11 of 12 games, I'm sure we're going to be mentioning that a lot on the broadcast today and post-game show tonight. But yeah, it's just great to be back. It felt like a long break. Like sometimes the break doesn't feel like that long, but it was nice to have, whatever it was, 3 or 4 days off with no Jets and just spend some time with family and friends. But more importantly, how was your trip?
Flying over the Pacific. It was good. It was good times. It was nice to be over there and enjoy some nice hot weather. And, of course, happy to be back in town. I was like, I walked back. I looked at the temperature. I was like, what am I coming back to? It's going to be -10, -15, +2. I'm like, it's warmer here than where I went. So, it was good holidays. I missed some things, though. The Jets were rolling while I was away, of course, and we're not going to look too far back, but big wins over the Minnesota Wild, big win over the Toronto Maple Leafs, but didn't come, Ezzy, without a cost. That cost, of course, being Hayden Fleury, who suffered that knee injury in the last minute of the second period in Toronto. When Scott Arniel was asked about it post-game against the Leafs, he had kind of said he was day-to-day, wasn't sure, blah, 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 which, his usual coach speak for, I'm not really going to give you much insight. And then yesterday, apparently Hayden Fleury tried to skate. To quote Scott Arniel, this is what he said specifically. I think we're looking at week to week here. He's going to get reevaluated again. At the end of the day right now, it's not good. He tried to skate on it this morning, and it didn't go very good. So Hayden Fleury, who had been asked to step up in weight class as the second pairing defenseman on that left side, he is out. And not only is he out, but he's, like I just said, he's out week to week, which means the Jets are going to be in need. They made their first move yesterday before practice got underway. They recalled Dylan Coghlan from the Manitoba Moose, who played 2 games with the AHL affiliate after playing only 1 game all season. That was that game against Vegas in November. And so I think he had 1 goal, 6 shots maybe. I think I said Daniel Fink, the Moose play-by-play broadcaster. So the move from the Moose after recalling Simon Lundmark before the thing for Toronto was to recall Dylan Coghlan. It looks as from what we saw in practice yesterday, I wasn't there. I didn't get back in time, but Connor Harapchak, who writes for a little site called illegalcurve.com, he indicated that Coghlan was up on the third pairing, split between Logan Stanley and Ville Heinola.
Well, you just mentioned, Dylan Coghlan and Simon Lundmark. If there's another injury, Simon Lundmark's going to be right back up with the Jets, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Because right now, and we should mention, maybe we should, go over the deep pairings a little bit, or the forward lines, because Scott Arniel said yesterday, and you were all over this on illegalcurve.com, the deep pairings are not set in stone, because just for those who aren't aware or maybe didn't see the tweets from IC or Murat or others, you mentioned Connor was at practice. I saw Liz Hood was at practice as well. They had Dylan Coghlan on the left side of the second pair. So the top pair was Josh Morrissey and Dylan DeMello, obviously the Jets' regular top pair. You had Neil Pionk, who's your regular second pairing right defenseman. And then they had Dylan Coghlan up there. And then they had Logan Stanley on the bottom pair. Who am I missing here, Dave?
Well, Ville Heinola and Logan Stanley were alternating. So Logan Stanley.
Who did they have on the right side, though, on the third pair? I'm forgetting now.
No, it was Dylan Coghlan and Logan Stanley to start practice. And then it was Dylan Coghlan and Ville Heinola to end practice. They had Miller with Pionk moved to his.
Sorry. Yeah, I screwed up here. Sorry. Let me start again. Let me start again.
It's right in the practice report on illegalcurve.com.
Yeah, no. Sorry. I don't need that. It's all in my head. That's probably the problem. But Colin Miller was up on the second pair on the left side. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. So they've got Colin Miller up on the left side of the second pair, and then they've got, most likely what we're thinking is it's going to be Logan Stanley on the left side and Dylan Coghlan on the right side. So this is a great opportunity for Dylan Coghlan. It's also a great opportunity for Colin Miller, right? Like, we've talked about this a lot. We thought Colin Miller, when he was a healthy scratch, a few weeks back, we were saying that he should have been in the lineup. So this is a great opportunity for Colin Miller. And now that I've got all the D pairs straightened out in my head here, Dave, it looks like Dylan Coghlan is going to be where you would expect him to be. But I mean, that left side guy it's decimated right now, right? Like we already talked about, without Dylan Samberg in the lineup, you've got Hayden Fleury playing a second pairing role, which obviously, that's not where ideally you would like him, but he did a nice job there. So a great opportunity for Dylan Coghlan. If you have a chance, I know Dave linked it in the papers on illegalcurve.com. Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press has a good article up about Dylan Coghlan, who's obviously a healthy scratch, 32 of the first 33 games. So I like Coghlan's game. I think he's going to be fine. And, obviously the Ottawa Senators are coming into town having lost their last game before the Christmas break, but a team that's in the middle of a long 9-game road trip, but playing some really good hockey. The only problem is they don't have a goalie right now.
They don't have two goalies, Ezzy.
Right. Linus Allmark, and for those, just updating everyone, Linus Allmark and Anton Forsberg are both out of the lineup. Linus Allmark looks like it's not going to be that short term as people were hoping. I believe it's a back injury.
Yeah, back
so it looks like Mads Sogard is going to play, the 24-year-old who only has, I think, 30 games of NHL experience.
24.
There you go. So Mads Sogard is going to be in net for the Senators. And obviously, the Senators have been a nice surprise, currently in a playoff spot. I think the second wild card spot.
Which, so for the record, I think I read somewhere, I think in Bruce Garriock, one of the guys who covers the Sens, or someone else, but they said that this is the first time, or the latest, that they've been in the playoff race, since 2016-17. Or sorry, the first time they've been in the playoff race, I should say, maybe since at Christmas time, which I guess would be pretty much the same thing. So yeah, there's no question that the Senators are 8-2-0. They're red hot, but without goaltending, and it looks like even up front they've got some guys who are dealing with some things.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, Dave, the Jets are coming off of huge wins over Minnesota and Toronto, where they scored 10 goals in 2 games. So that doesn't bode well for the Ottawa Senators. We know how potent the Jets are offensively at home. So I mean, that's a huge advantage for the Jets, right? We're expecting obviously Connor Hellebuyck to be in net. I mean, there are 3 games coming up in 4 days, so I think it would be shocking if Eric Comrie doesn't get one of those 3 games.
Yep.
But yeah, it's the Jets are dealing with some adversity on the back end, and look, I don't think it's anything that's going to cause them to lose games. I mean, all due respect to Hayden Fleury, he's not one of the more pivotal guys on the team, but
for sure.
Having said that, it's going to be a different look, and you've got Logan Stanley who's coming in, having missed the last couple of games. So he's going to be a little bit rusty, right? And I think he'll be fine, but it's just a different look offense. Right now, 2 of your 6 defensemen are guys that you kind of had penciled in as your 7th and 8th defenseman. So again, injuries present opportunities. Dylan Coghlan, you love to see a guy who's been a healthy scratch most of the season back in the lineup. And in that one game he played against Vegas, he was pretty good. Right.
And that to me is, someone said that someone texted or messaged us on Instagram. They said something about the defenseman, and they're call up Elias Salamonson. I'm like, well, he's injured with the Moose right now. He's expected back. They're playing the Texas Stars this weekend. I think we've got tickets to give away. As I better check. I'll check during the commercial break before we bring on Murat, and then we can figure that out. And
I'll be at that game tomorrow with the good folks at Hockey Manitoba. So looking forward to that Moose game.
I will also be at that game. So I will see you there at some point. But Yeah. So to me, it'll be interesting to see what they do in that regard. But we know that sorry. So my response to this person was like, look, this is an opportunity. A guy like Dylan Coghlan, who's been patient and waiting in the wings and playing the role of the good soldier who just, member of the team. As you said, as he referenced that article with Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press, and he mentioned how he didn't want to get claimed on waivers, which is an interesting position to take because, if you get claimed on waivers, it means that a team wants you and you're going to have to play. They can't send you down to the AHL. They want you to play on their NHL affiliate. So you'd think a guy would like, all right, but I tend to believe, and I don't know Dylan Coghlan's like family situation, but like sometimes that's more of a position of a younger guy because the younger guy knows like, okay, I may, when we've seen it with Johnny Kovacevic, who is helping your Devils to be one of the top teams in the NHL. I think he's actually up to
appreciate that shout out. Thank you. Big win yesterday over Carolina.
Yeah, goal and 10 assists for Johnny Kovacevic, the Jets' third rounder. But we're not going to digress into that waiver claim of yesteryear. Declan Chisholm, of course. So I think for younger guys who are hungry for that opportunity, it's always like if they get claimed, they know it's going to be a chance to play. By the way, happy anniversary to Ken. He's going to be in Winnipeg for the game tonight. His wife is bringing him today for his anniversary. So he's excited. And apparently he'll be wearing his IC hoodie underneath his Jets jersey, a la Superman. So happy anniversary to Ken and his wife. I don't know his wife's name, but to Ken and his wife. And Ken, you just be aware, if you're wearing your IC hoodie, you're more likely to get spotted by IC photographer Colby Spence and get a nice, anniversary picture. Or you can just send me a message and I'll get Colby to take a photo of you, and you'll have a nice memory of your. Usually Ken sits kind of across from us where we are in the press box, down by the glass. So I don't know if he's got those same seats for today's game, Ezzy, but congratulations to Ken. And thanks to, by the way, everyone else. This is, of course, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. That's Ezzy Ginsburg. We are chit-chatting about the Winnipeg Jets. They've got a big game to kick off. As Ezzy mentioned, almost 11, what is it? 11 games?
11 of the next 12. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird schedule, right? They go to Colorado for that one away game. But for the most part, the majority of January is going to be at home. So,
by the way, that Ezzy, don't gloss over it. That, by the way, Jess is Ken's wife's name. So, Jess, congratulations on your anniversary. But don't gloss over that New Year's game, Ezzy. That's going to be you, me, the big clock. Probably you wearing some sort of glasses that say 2025, kicking in the new year. So we'll be doing that, of course, here on the Illegal Curve post-game show.
And that's going to be a huge game. Colorado won again last night, right? So, I mean,
signed Mackenzie Blackwood to a 5-year deal.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to talk about that real quick? I mean,
not really. This is we'll keep the Jets talk going. We'll do the Avs preview when we get a few days from now.
It's a nice payday for a guy who looked like he was kind of banished a little bit in San Jose, right?
I was a little surprised by it. I'll just quickly say that I actually asked someone about it, and who's in the industry, and they said he's a very good goaltender, just needed his opportunity. So we'll see.
Well, I mean, Dave, he's got the athleticism, he's got the size, right? Like he's that prototypical, whatever he is, 6'5", 6'4", 6'6", whatever he is. We were there when he was drafted. He was a second-round pick of the Devils. Was that the Florida draft, Dave? I forget if that was the Florida draft or the Buffalo draft, but I remember we were there and he walked by us, and he's a big man. So, I mean, obviously New Jersey didn't have very good teams in front of him when he was there. It's only the last, 2 or 3 years where the Devils have turned into a good team.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, I just thought it was a lot of money to give a guy who hasn't really established himself as a number one goaltender yet. But again, Joe Sakic, who am I to get in the way of Joe Sakic and Chris McFarland, what they're doing in Colorado, right? I just was a little bit surprised. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised, Dave, if it was a 2-year deal or something like that, but a 5-year deal. But again, Colorado has obviously identified Blackwood as their goaltender of the present and future, right? So good for him. But yeah, this is not Avalanche lunch.
It is not at all. But yeah, you're right. And by the way, you were also correct. It was the Florida draft, second round pick of the New Jersey Devils back in 2015. A draft, of course, that Jets fans look back on, Ezzy, with a lot of pride, because that was probably unquestionably the best draft that they ever had, I would imagine. Except for
Boston just whiffing on Kyle Connor. Not
three
once,
times,
not twice, but 3 times.
Wasn't just Kyle Connor though. Who else did they skip? They missed someone else that was who went to the Islanders that year?
Barzal.
Yeah, it was Barzal. So they missed a couple of guys, because didn't Barzal go like 16th, I think?
Barzal went, I think, something like that. And is that not the David Pasternak draft as well? Didn't Pasternak go late?
Look, Yeah, but like the one thing I'll say is like everyone's always like, oh, the Jets drafted Christian Vesalainen and they could have had this guy. Well, yeah, okay, but so did 31 other teams, miss on that guy. So there's lots
Pasternak
of
was 2014, Dave. That was the Philly draft, so I was wrong. Pasternak was 25th overall in 2014. But yes, Boston definitely regrets not taking Kyle Connor. I mean, Jake DeBrusk turned out to be an okay pick, but the other two not so much.
No, for sure. But this isn't Bruins lunch, Ezzy. So we'll move things along. And I had Guy ask, what is the latest with Dylan Samberg? So we should, since we're talking about the Jets defense, Ezzy, and I did have an update on a little site called leocurve.com. So I'm not mad at Guy for not reading it, but I sent him the link in the chat. So if he wants to read it after, he can. But I'll do a little bit of reading right now because Dylan Samberg, of course, on the 20th of December, Scott Arniel had said that Samberg was expected to start skating on the 27th. Sure enough, the team tweeted out a picture of him at the Hockey for All Center yesterday on skates, regular jersey, but he was by himself. And this is what Scott Arniel, Jets head coach, had to say after the practice. It'll be a while just doing that. I can't tell you if it's 5 days or 10 days. He's going to be on the ice and just kind of gradually how it feels. But one big thing is putting that boot on. The comfort of having his boot on. He's talking about Sorel's, is he? And hopefully there's no swelling or anything like that comes from it. Just
Timberlands, actually, Dave. Timberlands.
Okay, got it. Just every day would be kind of reevaluating, talk to him, and see where he's going to move forward. So, look, the reality for, just to provide folks with an update is that we weren't expecting Dylan Samberg, who's been out since that November 23rd game against the Nashville Predators when he blocked that Steven Stamkos shot, broke his foot, got up, tried to block another shot from Stamkos. But the fact is that you weren't expecting him till at least the new year. It still sounds like he's still a little ways away, but good sign at least that he's on the ice and skating and kind of taking that next step towards returning to the lineup.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of Jets fans know how good Samberg is, but I think we have now maybe seen his value to the team without him in the lineup, right? And we've talked about this, we don't have to talk about it too much, but I mean, it's just good news that Samberg is getting close. And like you said, Dave, I mean, it could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 3 weeks, but the fact is it's just good to see him skating. I did catch some of the footage of him skating, and you could see, like, he's not going full tilt, but, you wouldn't expect him to be going full tilt when he's been off the ice for that long and the type of injury that he had, right? Blocking the Steven Stamkos blast against Nashville, right? So it's just good news for the Jets. And like we said before, I mean, the Jets are one injury away from, I think, being in a position where they might have to pull the trigger on a trade. Again, we hope that doesn't happen. But with Hayden Fleury week to week and Samberg essentially week to week, right? Like the earliest, I think you'd agree, Dave, that Samberg is going to be back is probably a week to 10 days. So hopefully the Jets don't suffer another injury, because then you're talking about Simon Lundmark is really your only option, right? You mentioned Elias Salomonson's currently injured. He's not an option. And then, I mean, you're talking about maybe Terrell Bauer, right? That's kind of your option. So you're getting very thin on defense. So again, great opportunity here for Dylan Coghlan on the third pair. Great opportunity for Colin Miller. And again, we should mention it's not guaranteed that Colin Miller is going to play the left side on the second pair, but it would make sense, right, Dave? Because then you've got your all-veteran top four, and then you've got Logan Stanley and Dylan Coghlan. I mean, in theory, Logan Stanley could play on your second pair. I wouldn't really advise that for Logan Stanley to be playing on the second pair, because we've talked about it. He struggled at times on the third pair. But again, I mean, I think the Jets, aside from those injuries, they're healthy, and they should be able to beat an Ottawa Senators, albeit a very talented Ottawa Senators team and a team who's won 8 of 10, as Dave mentioned earlier, in the middle of a long road trip. This game, I think, is going to be not as easy as some people think it's going to be. I mean, just because I said that, the Jets are probably going to win 6-2. But this team is very good. Everybody knows how good Brady Tkachuk is. Tim Stützle, Dave, I've told you this before. I think he's one of the most underrated superstars, kind of similar to Kyle Connor. I don't think Timmy Stützle, and you forget, he's only 22, 23 years old, very talented. Drake Batherson, Jake Sanderson on the back end. It's the goaltending, though, that I'd be concerned about, because Mads Søgaard at the NHL level, he's I think a second-round pick. He's been, shown flashes at the AHL level, and I think they thought he was, a couple years ago, he was going to be the goalie of the future, but he just hasn't proven it yet at the NHL level. So I think when it comes to Mads Søgaard in net for the Sens, that's a huge advantage for the Jets. You got to think they're going to be putting a lot of rubber on him early in this game tonight.
I don't think there's any question, and we're not going to get into the Heinola versus Stanley debate, Ezzy, because I think we've had that conversation 3,000 times on this show. But
that's a 3-year debate, Dave, going on now. 3 years we've been talking about that.
For sure. But James Robinson in the chat said, who's in, Stanley or Heinola? But the answer is we don't know. We know that both players, and if you read the practice report, which I believe just came out on, the pregame report, which just came out on a little site called legalcurve.com. But I think that I've got it written as Heinola / Stanley. Jets are having an optional morning skate in about 8 minutes now from now. So we may get some insight when Scott Arniel speaks after morning skate. He may reveal, he may be coy. We don't know if he's going to give us some insight as to who he's going to choose on his third pairing. But, again, Ville Heinola asked to come and play, against two good teams in Minnesota and Toronto. And this is an opportunity. It looks like they may, but again, like I said, we don't know if it's going to be Stanley or Heinola. So that's more of probably a subject of conversation that we'll have on the post-game show, because we'll have insight as opposed to speculation. So that is what we may get an answer about that. We'll, of course, keep you up to date on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. That's what this is. We bring it to you every Saturday at 9:00 in the morning, 2 hours of chit chat. Yeah, Stanley was on a pairing with Gus Bus, as Joe from Winnipeg points out, but so was Ville Heinola. So to start practice, it was Heinola and the Gus Bus, and then to end practice, it was Stanley and the Gus Bus. And Scott Arniel, I listened to his media availability yesterday, and he did say, we'll see how Logan comes in today, because that was his first, of course, we should mention, you already mentioned that he missed the 2 games, but that was a full practice and he was a full participant in the practice. But like I said, he was third pairing, and then he was the extra defenseman.
I'm kind of just, as you know, Dave, I have a little touch of ADHD, but, I'm almost thinking, just talking about David Gustafsson, a forward playing defense. What about Logan Stanley as a winger? Like that's something that hasn't been discussed a lot. He's big. Obviously, he's not the fastest guy, but, just a thought. I mean, you wonder if the Jets or any other team might use him as a forward, but I love to see the forward playing defense. That reminds you of, I know you'll appreciate this reference, Dave, the Detroit Red Wings had a couple guys. Sergei Fedorov did that back in the day. Matthew Dandino, remember him? He could play forward and defense. So you always love to see that. Obviously, Dustin Byfuglien, famous one here in Winnipeg. He, of course, used to play forward for Chicago, and then he was a defenseman for the majority of his NHL career. But yeah, Gus Bus, another guy who it's just good to see him back in the lineup, because he's obviously not a fighter. What happened with Trent Frederick was scary. Trent Frederick, obviously a POS for continuing to punch him while he's on the ice. We don't have to give Frederick any more air, any more breath, Dave, because everybody knows that was ridiculous to pick a fight with David Gustafsson, a guy who is probably the last guy who you expect to fight on the Jets, right? But just going back to tonight, obviously, Jets coming off of those 2 wins, but after the Christmas break, the holiday break, you kind of don't know what you're going to get, right? Like I think for all teams, you look at some of the games last night, right? Like some wild things can happen. Pun intended with the Wild winning last night in overtime. What a goal by Brock Faber. I know this isn't Wild Lunch, but that Brock Faber, Canada's going to have to look out for him in the Four Nations tournament, because that Brock Faber is a hell of a defenseman. So obviously the Wild pick up 2 points. The Stars got a point as well. So, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying before. And Mike McIntyre writes about it in today's Free Press, or I should say wrote about it in today's Free Press. There's a great opportunity here with all of these home games coming up in January, late December, January, I should say. They're going to have to keep the foot on the gas, because not only do you have Minnesota and Dallas right behind you, Colorado is, I mean, what are they, 8 or 9 points back? But the point is, this is going to be a race. Like, this is now going to be basically a marathon from now until the end of the season between those 4 teams. And 3 of those 4 teams we expected to be in the race. Minnesota was obviously the one team we thought it was going to be Nashville, right, Dave? But the point being that the Jets have a great opportunity here, to keep banking points, stay in first, and continue to separate themselves from some of the other teams in the Central.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And you're right, Ezzy. The Colorado Avalanche, similar to the Ottawa Senators, are 8-2-0, and they've won 4 straight. So they're hard charging, and they're excited to be, back in contention for that. They're, like you said, 7 points back of Winnipeg right now, but they're hard charging, and they score a lot of goals. They also give up a lot of goals, which is why their goal differential is only +4, whereas the Jets is a incredible +44 as the.
It's incredible, Dave, the goal differential, but also the fact that they're 25-2, and Colorado is still 7 points back, and they didn't
Mhm.
have a very good start, right? Their goaltending was a mess until they decided to trade both of their top two goaltenders, right? So it's going to be, again, you would think that the Jets would have a much bigger cushion in the Central Division, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that Central Division is the best division in the league right now. At least at the top it is.
Yeah, I don't think you're too far out on that limb, and depending on how much holiday food you've eaten, that could be a crack limb if you're feeling a little heavy after all this holiday food and holiday rejoicing. Well, we're rejoicing here on a Saturday morning. This is, of course, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's Ezzy Ginsberg. We're previewing the Jets' Sens. We're also talking about pretty much anything to do with the NHL and AHL clubs of Manitoba, and I'd say their prospects. But the prospects, Ezzy, there's been a paucity of information because there's been an absence of games, I should say. The Jets prospects in the WHL and OHL and even in college haven't really been in the mix. So right now, the Jets, there hasn't been a ton. Of course, we probably should briefly mention kudos to Team Latvia. Who survived a 55 shot onslaught. I thought Arturs Irbe was back in that.
I think it was, that's a good reference. Arturs Irbe with the Yofa cage. Yeah. Arturs Irbe with the white pads and the Yofa helmet. Just incredible. For those who weren't watching, it was 19-year-old Latvian goaltender Leinards Feldbergs who stopped. Not only did he stop whatever it was, Dave, 54, 55 shots.
Alex is saying in the chat, saying 56 shots.
Okay, yeah, let's get the number right. Let's give him the respect. He earned every single one of those saves. He stopped every single save in every single shot in the shootout, including Jets prospect Braden Yager. I thought Braden Yager was going to end it for sure.
He had that really good chance in overtime, but again, the commitment to defense by Latvia was incredible, and they prevented him from basically putting it into an empty net.
And again, we're Canadian, so obviously we're always going to hope for Team Canada, but let's give Latvia a ton of credit. Like, for them, this is like winning the Stanley Cup. It really is. Beating Canada in the preliminary round is huge. Those guys were celebrating like they won the gold medal.
And
right?
I've seen from people who were there, they were like, they don't want to come off the ice. Apparently they circled the ice like 3-4 times in Ottawa.
Good for them. I am the most, Dave, I'm fiercely proud to be Canadian. And I hope that,
absolutely.
And this doesn't just apply to hockey. When I'm watching the Olympics, I'm watching soccer, basketball, whatever, I'm always pulling for Team Canada. And I hate it every single time Canada loses. But that's a situation where you have to just, tip your hat to the Latvians. I mean, they tied up the game in the third period. They obviously were outplayed. Canada outplayed them badly in the overtime. But then Canada took that too many men on the ice penalty late in the overtime, something you rarely see in 3-on-3 overtime. So, yeah, just great for Feldbergs, great for Latvia. Obviously, nobody really expects them to medal, but after beating Canada, who knows, right?
Who knows indeed. Well, as we should get to some commercials so we can bring Murat on and not keep him waiting, we will take a pause of this conversation here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, setting up Jets and Senators, and be back right after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's my main man, Ezzy Ginsberg. And without further ado, another of our main men on this show, Murat Atesh of The Athletic. Hey, Murat, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
How are the holidays for you?
You're looking good. Happy holidays, my man.
Yeah.
We could get into the Jets talk right away, but I want to hear about your holidays. Do you have a nice little vacation, a little chance to, get some R&R?
Yeah, you know what? I shut down for a few whole days there, which I don't normally do. Like I avoided Twitter, I avoided emails, I avoided all of it. And I don't know if you guys ever struggle with the full disconnect. Sometimes it takes me a little while, like a couple of days before the urges to check things go away. I got right into it, ate all the food, sang all the songs, did all the decorating, and Haley's been out, so it's been great.
Well, I only do that in the summer where I fully turn off my phone for about 3 or 4 days, and it is a great way to disconnect, but it is not an easy thing to do, especially in a business that is, things can change so quickly. Lots of change, of course, on the Jets back end with, of course, the injury to Hayden Fleury, Dylan Sandberg still coming up. That's something we talked about in the first half an hour of the show. Just in terms of the way it was configured yesterday at practice, are you a little surprised, both with the promotion, I guess, of Colin Miller to that second pairing, but also the apparent. We're not really sure if it's going to be Heinola or Stanley in that third unit. And of course, Dylan Colgan up from the Moose.
Yeah, going back to the third period against Toronto, I guess the clues were there all along that Miller moved up to play with Pionk for most of that period as they rotated through, and Ville Heinola didn't get a lot of ice time to end that game. So I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. Was I? Each coach has their own preferences. Some would avoid a righty-righty pairing, and I think that's part of why Hayden Fleury got that bump up in the first place before he got hurt. But at a certain point in the Jets depth chart, Scott Arniel and company, Dean Chenoweth and et cetera, don't necessarily feel comfortable with the depth left defense bumping up. So it seems, and Arniel warned us not to take everything as written in stone. It seems as though Miller Pionk is going to be the look. And that means that they don't see Logan Stanley or Ville Heinola as, capable of those top 4 minutes. Maybe realistic, guys. That seems... I don't think Stanley's there. We've got a bigger sample on him. Ville Heinola, I thought he played 2 of his best games heading into the break there. But at the same time, I understand that that's not where they have him in the depth chart. The interesting thing is it's becoming more and more and more and more clear that Logan Stanley holds a higher spot in this rotation than Ville Heinola does. Mm-hmm. And I think that, Heinola is still a work in progress, still... there are certain shifts where I wonder about conditioning after missing 2 straight months and all of that sort of stuff. But I mean, he's knocking down pucks, he's jumping into plays and things like that. I think it's getting to be a tougher and tougher argument that he should be anything but an equal member of that rotation. And then after just the end the monologue, the question I always get is, well, if Heinola's better or if there's other options or anything like this, then why do they keep playing Logan Stanley? And they appreciate his size. They appreciate his toughness. He's a beloved teammate. He steps up for teammates and has fought, even though it's not necessarily in his DNA, is figuring his way out through that world. Does that help them in terms of puck retrievals and coverage and all that sort of stuff? No, it doesn't. But it gives them a look that they feel comfortable with. And at the edges of a roster, that's the bet that they make and keep making.
Now, Murat, just sticking with the defense here for a second, and I agree with you. I think, that's an interesting point you make about, I think people, we have short-term memories sometimes, right? And you mentioned Ville Heinola's conditioning as possibly being a factor. And you're absolutely right. I think right now, the Jets are favoring Logan Stanley ahead of Heinola. We'll wait and see what happens as the season progresses. But as I mentioned, just sticking with the defense, Dylan Samberg, obviously you reported this, that, back on the ice yesterday, when the Jets are fully healthy, when they've got Samberg back, when Hayden Fleury's back in the lineup, and I realize, we're still over 2 months away from the trade deadline, but as you know, in hockey, you've been covering hockey a long time. It's gonna those questions, like there's gonna be a lot of Marcus Pettersson, comments in the chat coming up, or other defensemen that could be available. David Savard, I know Jets fans have been kind of hot to talk about David Savard a lot, but do you think that the Jets, when they're healthy, they need to go out and acquire defensemen? Do you expect them to acquire a defenseman? Because I still look at this defense, and I think Hayden Fleury's done a nice job on the left side, maybe playing a little bit higher in the lineup than you'd like. But what's your kind of take on the Jets when they're healthy and going forward? If they're going to be a real Stanley Cup contender, do they need to acquire a defenseman?
Yeah, Ezzy, I'm going to answer your question with yes and yes. I mean, sometimes we get onto the quibbles, right? Like I'll argue that, this player or that player should be in the lineup, et cetera. But the overall picture is this is a very good Jets team, right? This is a very good Jets team in a good cap position, a better cap position than a lot of the other sort of long list contenders out there. And when you're in that position, and whenever Winnipeg's been in that position, they add, they shop, they build, they add to what they have. And this is probably a better team even than last year when they went out and got Monahan and Miller. This is definitely a better team than when they got Niederreiter and Nemesnikov. That 2017-18 team still holds a special place in my echelon of Jets teams, despite the fact that it may not go down as the most points that Jets 2.0 has ever got, but they went out and struck there too. We get that. That's the theme. That's what they do. And they're in a great cap position. So when you lay everybody out healthy and you go back to that Morrissey, DeMello, Samberg, Pionk, and then take your pick your poison of Stanley, Miller, or Heinola, or Fleury Miller as well as an option there. I think that needs an upgrade. To me, it's clear the Jets value Stanley's size, his physicality, his penalty killing. Well, what about that player who can also handle top 4 minutes? What about somebody who's going to throw hits and drop the gloves in those must fight situations, but who can also drive play a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where you get onto to guys' wish lists. I think it's too late that this ship has sailed, but a Chris Tanev type would be would be a beauty on this team. Somebody who plays top 4 is really a genuine protect the middle of the ice guy, not just big on paper, but like actually the coverage is there, the fight is there. He doesn't lose guys. Like he's just such a veteran with top 4 experience. One name I've heard, I don't know how much there is to it, but like I know they've liked him in past years, back when he used to be thought of a little more highly around the league. But Rasmus Ristolainen, who sort of rejuvenated his career out in Philadelphia mostly. There's a physical player who you might be able to play on the edges of the roster. Mackenzie Weegar is a dream acquisition for me personally.
Sign me up for Mackenzie Weegar, Murat.
We've been talking about him on this show for a long time. That's the dream, the right side.
Yeah, if you can basically take that physicality spot, so you're not worried about Stanley's defensive coverage against Nathan McKinnon or whomever in the playoffs, the handling that speed, so that bumps him into the press box, in my point of view. And it also takes the load off of Neil Pionk, and also takes the load off of Dylan DeMello, who might become a third pairing defenseman in that scenario, or a second pairing, or however they want to switch things up. The Jets have a lot of good players on defense. This isn't a slight to any of those names that I just named, but if they want to be one of those elite contending teams, they probably want to go more than just Morrissey deep, where you're going like, whoa. Or Sandberg actually has had a great start to the year, so I got to give him credit as well.
All right, Murat. Well, we know you, before the holiday break, wrote a fantastic article on Kyle Connor's defense. Yes, I said Kyle Connor's defense and his impact there. So maybe share with some folks who didn't get a chance to read it on The Athletic, although I recommend you do. And of course, I linked it in the morning papers. But just because that is a subject of conversation for years now, has been the type of impact he can have. We all know the offensive impact he can have and what he's done on that end of the rink. But from what you were talking about with him and the coaching staff, what did you kind of ascertain about Kyle Connor this year that's different than years prior?
Yeah, I almost want to start in the beginning, like when he was a rookie, or I guess in his second season, because he played 20 games in 2016-17. So back when when Matthew Perreault gets hurt, it's October 2017 or November 2017. Kyle Connor comes up and sticks forever, right? Like becomes a 30-goal guy. Few players score more goals than he does from the moment he's a full-time NHL player to now. I think he's in the top 10 in goals. So that's incredible. At that time, Paul Maurice and I would sometimes have these little side chats. And in one of those side chats, Paul Maurice told me, you know what, with Kyle Connor, I hold him in that Andrew Kopp type of defensive acumen. I don't really need to show him tons of defensive video. And I sort of like, it's one of those things that was said so comfortably and confidently. I didn't think about it in the moment. And then over the years, we've seen the defensive metrics go in two different directions, right? Winnipeg's checking line, phenomenal. Kyle Connor has generated tons of scoring chances, but even in his 93-point season, he was outscored or even at 5-on-5. This is one of the world's best offensive seasons, the best offensive season of a Jets 2.0 player ever. And he wasn't dominating or controlling even or winning his minutes at 5-on-5, which points to the fact that, he gives stuff back. And part of that is line mates. He's one of multiple people on the ice at any given moment. But we've seen certain things that he struggled with. He is a fast skater. So when he's committed to the back check, he can overtake guys, lift a stick, pop a stick, go the other way. We've seen that sporadically in the past. This year, we're seeing it fairly consistently. Last year, we saw it fairly consistently too. There are steps forward. It's not just snap a finger. Kyle Connor told me, no, Murat, I haven't had an epiphany in my game, but here's some things we can talk about, right? So the speed has been there. The stick has been there. But some of the stuff that has really, truly led to Kyle Connor's poor defensive metrics have been transition plays. And that can be Winnipeg Jets breakouts where a puck gets rimmed to him on the wall and he doesn't eat that check to get that puck out. in part, like we've seen Winnipeg get burned for goals like that this year. Actually, Logan Stanley put an awkward pass on it to Connor's stick not too long ago, right? Those are plays that he can still get beat on. It is a limitation of this great player that this is one of the things he doesn't have success with sometimes. But it used to be Mark Scheifele, Gabriel Vilardi, whoever he's playing on that line with, wasn't offering the low support consistently. When the breakout began, Winnipeg's forwards were in the neutral zone ready for what came next, no matter what was going on. I think Kyle Connors had more outlets, and he's taken better advantage of those outlets. He's certainly committed to that back check a higher percentage of the time, and he's popping sticks, and he's really knocking pucks down. The team's continuing to play good quality 5-on-5 defense most of the time. Gabriel Vilardi's good health means there's another player who doesn't have Connor's foot speed, but is also knocking pucks down. Winnipeg scored goals where the other team's trying to break the puck out of their end, and Gabriel Vilardi's knocked a stick down at the offensive blue line, and boom, you've got this transition rush for the Jets. You add it all up, and Kyle Connor is actually harder to get a scoring chance against this year. Teams have a harder time getting scoring chances against the Jets with Kyle Connor on the ice than any season in his career other than 2017-18 when he played with prime Blake Wheeler as his number one line mate and prime Dustin Byfuglien as his number one defense pair. So this is a market difference. You see it in the eyes mostly, though I think there's some team effects as well. And his defensive metrics, all the underlying number sites, he's gone from a big black hole defensively to a tiny bit above average, which is amazing news when you have the offensive package that Kyle Connor has as well. So this is a really wonderful start to a season from number 81. And I think it's worth talking about. Like we go even in more detail in that article.
No, absolutely. And I think you make a lot of good points there. And, you know, we talk about it a lot on the post-game show, right, Murat? Like, I don't get sick of talking about it because Kyle Connor this year, I think he's playing the best hockey of his career. And based on what you just said, the fact that his defensive play is catching up to his offensive wizardry backs that up, right? Like the numbers back it up that he's harder to play against. He's doing a better job. It's not like you're seeing him make a couple of good plays defensively once every month. You're starting to see that almost every game. I wanted to ask you about Gabriel Vilardi, his line mate, obviously coming off of a really nice hat trick of assists against the Toronto Maple Leafs. That top line was obviously extremely dangerous, led the Jets over the Leafs in that big victory. Dave and I are going to talk about it in the next segment. And I wanted to ask you, based on what you've seen this year, because obviously Vilardi's having a breakout year, whatever you want to call it. He's a breakout year. He's on track for a career year. He's been phenomenal so far this season. Based on what you've seen, we know he's a pending RFA. I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, but based on what you've seen, and I'm sure you're going to write about this, but based on what you've seen, like, are you prepared to sign him to an 8-year deal? Like, what are you thinking right now based on what you've seen? Is this a 4 or 5 year deal? Is an 8-year deal? Because I'm pretty excited. I'm fired up. If I'm Chevy, I'm thinking 8-year deal right now.
Yeah, it's a great question because he's such a big, important part of the future. If he signs to that effect and is a big part of it, he clearly has the chemistry and the respect of the other big dogs in Scheifele and Connor and on that top line. Coaches appreciate the way that he plays. There's a two-way element to him. He really does have a great stick knocking down pucks. And then, like, you're a coach, right? You've seen kids try to. Essie, do you coach sometimes? Do I have that in my mind?
Well, I coached 1 year. I coached hockey one. Murat, you might be thinking of my recent coaching U7, my kids in U7 soccer tuxedo Timbits. That might be what you're.
That's got to be it.
No, I've coached a little bit, but no, I work at Hockey Manitoba, so I administer the coaches. Let's put it that way.
Okay, fair play. Yeah, I was gonna try to force something here where, like, you know, as kids, we're all taught, you know, stick handle with your head up. Don't look at it, right? Like, know where the puck is, but also see what's going on. And, you know, I think a lot of kids, or at least, you know, I paid lip service to that idea, but Gabriel Vilardi took that note to a level that is like seldom matched in the NHL, in that when he's got one or even two defenders trying to, like, eliminate a play along the boards, he still has the presence of mind to make a pass or make a play because he's scanning the ice so well. He sees the ice so incredibly well. We've seen it on the power play, etc. Now, the length of that deal, that's the question you asked. I think that it's a tough spot because there are existing concerns about his injury history in the past and his longevity as a player, and to those sorts of things, Winnipeg would have better information than I do in that regard. But I think it's a slightly bigger bet than it looks like at a time he's having a career year. Assuming, knock on wood, I believe he'll stay healthy for the first. I got a wooden table underneath this laptop, so I did it. This will be the first fully healthy season of his career if it all works out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is he 25 years old? Did he turn 26 this time? He's in that range. That's
25.
25 years old. This is prime age. I would hesitate to want to buy the early 30s of a player who is getting to 25 and hasn't had a fully healthy season yet. So I'm leaning more in the 4 to 5 million, or sorry, 4 to 5, not million. He'll get way more than that. 4 to 5 year camp myself. And that's not the deep dive, but that's the hot take, is I think that sort of that medium term deal. I don't expect this guy's offense to like suddenly be 100 points or whatever to the point where that you're regretting that you paid him for 4 or 5 years. Just where I sit today, I think it's more of a medium term thing.
Yeah, Murat, I tend to agree with you. I said I was fired up earlier, and I would give him 8 years. But I'm with you. I wouldn't be surprised if they give him the longer term deal. But I'm expecting it, like you said, to be kind of in the 4 or 5 year range. Obviously, we shall wait and see. But I think the injury history, you make a good point. That's going to factor in big time whether or not they buy out more of those UFA years, right?
Yeah. Just one more thing is like it could also become an item of personal factors, right? Like he is a Winnipeg Jet because somebody else didn't want to be. Mm-hmm. And if Jets management approaches this and they have a great conversation, it seems that Gabriel Vilardi really is doubled down and bought in and everything has fit right and he feels good here. It might not be maximize the efficiency of betting on the injuries or whatever it is that I'm talking about. It might be this guy wants to be here that long. Well, let's go. That might have a factor as well.
Well, we have lots of factors on this show, and we always appreciate your insight. We're going to keep rolling with Murat Atesh of The Athletic. And Murat, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned UFAs, is it's one thing we haven't really heard from Kevin Cheveldayoff in quite some time, I thought. And, last year he didn't want to get into it. He didn't want to kind of break up with the various UFAs. So he rolled into the summer and then, of course, re-signed Dylan DeMello. But he did allow that process to kind of play itself out with Brendan Dillon, Dylan DeMello. And we knew about that. This year they've got even more UFAs, but none more important than Nikolai Ehlers and what he's going to do. So, of course, we know that he's, having a point per game season so far, dealt with some injury, of course, after that game in Vegas. But from your perspective, is it all quiet on the Western Front? Do you just think that they're just going to allow this to play out and just try and like I said, add the way you think that they're going to add? And a lot of people think they'll add because they consider themselves to be a contender. But do you think that Kevin Cheveldayoff will just try and avoid this sort of subject of conversation for the remainder of the year?
I suspect so. I think he'll have to address it because he usually meets with media, in advance of the trade deadline. It should be coming up, right? In the new year, there should be one more Kevin Cheveldayoff media availability.
Yeah. And
those questions will be loud, I think, there. I always wondered about that Carolina situation with in the offseason, there was some rumors about Marty Necas, and now we've seen what kind of season he's off to, and that ship may have sailed, let's say. And of course, I think he's got a new contract there as well, in Carolina. But the idea of an offseason Nikolai Ehlers moved for a center probably would have made a lot of sense for the Jets. I have no idea to what degree it's palatable for them in the regular season, a mid-season trade, if they can find a quality center who maybe has a year or more left on his deal and can build a package around that. That's a tough trade to pull off. I think it's one of those situations where if the Jets really did get something that blew their mind, it could happen. But at the same time, every time I ask anybody, they say they don't know. I talked to Nikolai Ehlers about it kind of after some of the initial stuff had died down at camp. And, he was fairly straightforward, saying that, look, I don't know. If I had a little more, I wouldn't lie to you. I wouldn't hide it from you. but it's just at that stage. He confirmed that they do talk from time to time. They do, check in and all that sort of stuff. He made a point of saying that he's never felt as I guess connected or bought into a team as he's done with the Jets in the last while. Like, he clearly loves his teammates and everything to that effect. So it's fascinating to get to this point without resolution. And I can't say I know what's happening. I think some people have assumed the trade is absolutely not going to happen. I don't think it's over 50%, but I don't think it's zero either. You know what I mean? I bet those conversations are happening. A big time center, if they could do it, a top 4D, if they could do it. But I also think that maybe they got some realistic lessons about Brad Lambert and Nikita Chibrikov too, saying like every fan's offseason dream on the message boards that I was reading was Brad Lambert's going to arrive. He'll be a 70-point player and you won't need Nikolai Ehlers at all.
Mm-hmm.
Brad Lambert's a darn good hockey player, a darn good prospect, lots to love, a ton to love, but I don't think that we're approaching January with Nikolai Ehlers as suddenly expendable or anything to that regard either. So yeah, I guess I'm just watching with a fascinated eye, especially, one more thing, what you said, Dave, at the beginning, like, we knew, or we've learned since that, like, their approach last year, Niederreiter signed early, DeMello and Dillon, those conversations didn't happen until late. And, that burned some people. I don't think Brendan Dillon appreciated that. I don't think that was, I think the Jets circled back to Dillon in the summer, but then that was a case of a little bit too little too late kind of deal. And I think managing when you have multiple people, and, well, is that guy more important than me, or all that sort of stuff, is actually a bit of a delicate game if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff.
Like you said, Murad, even though there's a lot of uncertainty, boy, do I hope that the Jets sign Ehlers just personally, because you just saw, his importance in those, 8 games, 9 games he was out of the lineup. So obviously, hockey's a business, blah, blah, blah. But I just hope that they're able to sign him. I just want to say that. I wanted to ask you about Cole Perfetti. Recently in The Athletic, you wrote about Perfetti's playing the best hockey of his career. And obviously that game against Minnesota, where he had a goal and a couple assists, that was nice to see. That was the kind of, Perfetti at his peak. I wanted to ask you, because obviously I think you'd agree, Perfetti's a bit of a lightning rod for criticism, right? Like, people, it's almost like, the highs are high, the lows are low type of thing with Cole Perfetti. Like, how would you assess the biggest strengths and weaknesses of his game? Because I think we've seen it on the power play. We've seen the vision, the creativity, everything like that. Like, what are you seeing? Like, when Perfetti's having a goal and a couple assists, 3-point night against the Wild, like, what are you seeing in it? Like, what is he doing that maybe he's not doing when he's struggling out there?
Yeah. Starting with an analogy, hoping it works. Have you ever been driving with somebody, what is it, down Corridon towards Bernstein's to get the illegal curve sandwich?
Love it. Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, no sweat. Just came to me. And like they're trying to change lanes and they've got cars in the opposite lane. And like, you can tell that they have a spot to go and switch, but they haven't realized it yet. They're trying to figure out, I don't know if you've ever been in this situation in your life, but there's a processing of time and moving parts and space that goes into the shoulder check and the know if you have space, or if you're ever driving along that same road and you've got a median and somebody doesn't know that their car's butt is actually sticking out, even though they have room to be more, all these sorts of things. I use driving as an analogy, sometimes hoping that it will click and I'll find the word someday to make it make sense. But you have to process a lot of moving parts when you're driving, a lot of moving time and space at high speeds. And I think that the thing that people don't always understand about Cole Perfetti is he does that on the ice better than more elite players than him. Like, he processes time and space. He knows where a complete defense of 5 players is moving. He knows if he can, almost Scheifele-esque, wait until there's room under the triangle, under the stick to make a pass, or behind a player. He sees these timing plays, and he sees it as a forechecker too. He's been doing a better job in the last month or so of knocking down pucks. That second line, or third line, if you want to call it that, of Perfetti, Namestnikov, and Ehlers, doesn't really have business being a great forechecking line. They're not that fast outside of Ehlers. They're not big, all that sort of stuff, right? But they've done a really good job of generating offense because they forecheck, took the right angles, and then somebody, often Cole Perfetti, especially when Ehlers was hurt, Cole Perfetti was knocking down pucks for Brad Lambert and for other players consistently. And when you do things like that, it keeps the play in the offensive zone. The other thing about when the puck's on his stick in the offensive zone and he's seeing all of the stuff that I say that he sees, well, earlier in this conversation, we talked about the Kyle Connor backcheck. We saw it every once in a while. We knew it was possible. And that's a discredit to him to make it seem like a rare universal event, but it wasn't all the time. Mm-hmm. And there were times where Cole Perfetti last year would generate a few scoring chances in a clump, and then there'd be some shifts where it wasn't as good as that, or a game or two where it wasn't as good as that. Even during his long slump, he was creating some things, but it wasn't so much that I was convinced he's going to boil over at any minute. And before that 3-point night, I was talking to some people kind of about Perfetti, and I said, this guy looks like a pot that's ready to boil over. This is something that's happening. I got lucky on the call because the points came, but he is creating chances with a consistency where now I'm like, oh, if he has an off shift, there's going to be 3 chances on another one. And I think as a really good secondary scorer who's working on consistency, I think he's arrived as somebody who can make a difference in that role.
Well, as he asked you about Gabriel Vilardi as a contract, and there's one player that, as and I mentioned this, there hasn't been a lot of talk about him and his next contract, but we saw how important he's been since he blocked that shot in Nashville and has been out, and the impact, the defensive impact his absence has caused this Jets team. I mean, what from a perspective of signing a player, an RFA with Arbrights, Dylan Samberg, how important is getting him to a significant deal? Because the truth is, the left side, there is not a significant amount of depth in the prospect system right now on that left side. Actually, a lot of it is on the right. So from your perspective, Murat, what do you see in terms of how important is it to get Dylan Samberg signed to some sort of significant contract? Because there really is an absence after him.
Yeah, this is vital. That's one that I think you talk about a year limit on that. I'm not sure I see one. The idea, players in Dylan Samberg's shoes who provide top 4 excellence on the defensive side of the puck, but are not generating a load of points, no power play time, solid even strength production, but just recently this year, and we don't know if it'll last all season. And even if it does, it's the first time. They don't get paid a ton of money, right? Like they're not getting the $7 million deals or what have you. And I don't know if the number is 5. I don't know if it's 4 or even 6. Like anything in that range. I actually don't know at this stage what it will be or what it becomes, whether it's big or small. But it's going to be in a range that a team can afford because of the lack of offense. And to your point, he is so unique on the Jets blue line. He is the guy that's physical enough, just enough. He's not laying people out every night, but he's physical enough to protect the middle of the ice. And the closest replicator is Logan Stanley, but he doesn't cover as well. He doesn't see the ice as well. Samberg doesn't get beat by, he didn't see the guy over his shoulder kind of deal. That's not there. So he's actually really stabilized that second pairing with Neil Pionk in the way that you always hoped that he would. And that's a player, to my mind, that you keep for as long as you can. There aren't others of him coming except where it's Elias Salomonsson, who I don't know if the comparison holds for you guys, but at the AHL level, I think he controls things to a point where I'm like, he might have the defensive impact that Samberg is having right now when he gets to the NHL. Mm-hmm. And I think he's vital. I don't know what you do if you can't sign Samberg long term. And this was the risk of going 2 years ago. Cautioned about it at the time at The Athletic as well, because there were signs.
Well, there's lots of signs of good tidings during this holiday season, and we appreciate every time you bring your analysis and your insight here on the Legal Curve Hockey Show. So thank you very much, Murat, for joining us this Saturday morning.
Thank you. And tell Drew that I feel like this is a personal affront. He's not waving to me presently. Hope all is well with you guys and with him as well. Have a great rest of your weekend here.
All right. Thanks, Murat. That's Murat Atesh of The Athletic. Winnipeg, we'll be seeing him hopefully in the press box. Yay, nay, maybe later today when the Jets do battle with the Ottawa Senators. Thanks, Murat, for joining us. There he goes. And there we go, because that's a great segment. We got to go to commercial break, hear from our sponsors, but a real good segment, a lot of good insight, something that we'll be talking about on the other side of these words from our sponsors.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime, visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in two unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door, too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's Ezzy Ginsberg. We just had a great segment with Murat Atesh of The Athletic. Of course, if you didn't get a chance to listen or watch that entire thing, we'll have it on the podcast, which you can download wherever you get your podcasts, or you can go to legalcurve.com, Ezzy, and that's where it is immediately after this show, where I will post it. And of course, you can always watch our replay on our YouTube channel. We're inching closer to 7,000 subs, as we need everybody who's watching this. Make sure you're subscribing, folks. Smash that like button. Let other people know about the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, the Illegal Curve Postgame Show, the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, which of course provides you as one of the only places. In fact, I think it is the only place, because the Jets don't post their interviews. So it's the only place to get Jets interviews, Moose interviews. Make sure you're subscribing. It's your one-stop shop. We at least try to make it your one-stop shop as for all the latest Jets news alongside illegalcurve.com. And speaking of Jets news, as not a ton out of this optional morning skate, but I will tell you that interestingly, Dylan Coghlan was on for extra work. He stayed on for extra work. That's as per our friend Kenny Weeb. So looks like Logan Stanley will draw back in and Ville Heinola will play. So he'll stay in the lineup alongside Logan Stanley, who returns, and Dylan Coghlan will be the odd man out. And there is a question mark up front because neither David Gustafson nor Rasmus Kupari stayed on late for extra work. So it appears that maybe there's a health issue for one of the forwards. So Gustafson will at least probably take warm up around 5:30 p.m. tonight. And we'll, of course, keep you up to date on that. But interesting, we don't have to talk about it too much, but just interesting to see that they're going to go with Stanley and Heinola versus throwing Coghlan in.
Right, and a few weeks back we saw a little bit of Stanley Heinola on the right side. Heinola on the right side, I should say, not Stanley on the right side, right? So a little bit surprising, but kind of, contradicts what we were saying in the first segment, right? Dylan Coghlan looked like he was going to get, an opportunity because he hasn't played a lot of NHL games this year, right? He's played the one game. Was it the one game against Vegas or two?
Yeah, just one game.
Just the one, and then a little bit with the Moose, right? A few games with the Moose.
2 games with the Moose, yeah.
Unfortunate for Coghlan, but again, the rotation continues, right? We'll see how Stanley and Heinola play together. Dylan Coghlan, maybe he comes in against Nashville. There's a back-to-back with Nashville and Colorado, so maybe you see Coghlan in one of those games, depending on how Stanley and Heinola are playing. But certainly, right now, it's an opportunity for some young defensemen, to get into games where maybe otherwise they wouldn't be if Dylan Samberg and Hayden Fleury were in the lineup, right? Like we've talked about it on the Saturday show, and we've talked about it on some of the post-game shows, right? Like when the Jets are healthy, is it Hayden Fleury? Is he the front runner to be the third pairing left side defenseman? Looks like it, right? But he's been a little bit shaky at times, right? So then if he's not your third pairing left side defenseman, then obviously it's the Stanley Heinola debate that we've been having for the last 3 years, right, Dave?
Yeah.
So that goes back to what we were talking about with Murat. I think absolutely a left side defenseman is what you're looking for at the trade deadline, specifically left side. I think, with Dylan DeMello, with Neil Pionk, and with Colin Miller on the right side, I'm a lot more comfortable with those 3 guys. And then you've got Dylan Coghlan as your 7th, right? Your 4th right side defenseman, if you want to call it that. So for me, the left side is absolutely, if I'm Chevy, I'm looking for some left side defenseman. I realize that, some people were, was that a week ago, Dave, or a couple weeks ago now? I forget. I think it was about a week ago. Alex Carrier was acquired by the Montreal Canadiens, and he was a defenseman. We should mention he's a right shot defenseman. But I saw that and I was thinking like that Carrier would look nice on the Jets, just to give them some added depth. But like I said, that's on the right side. So we'll see what happens. We've got 2.5 months before the trade deadline. Obviously, we're going to be all over it on the Saturday show, all over it on illegalcurve.com. It's going to be something a lot of Jets fans are going to be debating, which defenseman, which second line center the Jets should acquire. But again, we'll see it. We'll see. It's not Stanley versus Heinola tonight. It's going to be Stanley with Heinola.
You heard it here first. That is the news out of the optional morning skate. Is it appears at least that the third pairing will be Stanley and Heinola, not Stanley versus Heinola. Although maybe they were.
Is it Heinola or Heinola? Because you say Heinola, I say Heinola.
It's Heinola. But I unfortunately it is Heinola, but I call him Heinola. It's habit. It's like Murat actually.
Yeah, Murat.
I tend to call sometimes I go Murat, but it's actually Murat.
It's Murat.
And so I sit there and I struggle. I'm like, okay. And then the problem is usually Drew handles the hosting responsibilities. So I'm like, okay, I don't have to worry about last names, getting them right, wrong, whatever. But of course, now that I'm in the host chair today, as there's a little more responsibility, a little more weight on my shoulders here. Of course, that's often never. James Ham, we appreciate that. I see often imitated, never duplicated. Love this OG Jets coverage crew.
I thought I'd put that one up, Dave. That was a nice little comment from our boy James Ham. Unfortunately, Ham's not kosher, but regardless, it's still a great comment.
But we're still big fans of James Ham, regardless of that. And again, we want to thank everyone for spending time with us here on Saturday morning. You could be doing a lot of other things, and yet there's lots of you in the chat sharing part of this discussion and your Saturday with us, and we always appreciate that. So thank you to you. As let's move on from the D, because I honestly feel like we've talked about this enough. But really, one of the things that you just mentioned was that we could talk about Dylan Samberg, we could talk about Gabriel Velarde, and I think we'll start
with Dylan Samberg. I'm going to put it out there right now, Dave. Give Dylan Samberg 8 years right now. Don't even think twice about it, Chevy. Give him 8 years. Obviously, there's that little thing about the millions of dollars that you're going to have to come to an agreement about. But anybody who listens to the show knows how big of a fan I am of Dylan Samberg. I think the guy is just a tremendous defenseman, good human being. Everybody saw the pieces over the years that have been done. Samberg and Perfetti roommates, right? Like he's a very well-liked guy. I just think that for me, like it's a no-brainer almost. Like Samberg, to have Josh Morrissey and Dylan Samberg on your left side for the next, what does Morrissey have, 7 years left on his contract, 6 years left on his contract, whatever.
Yeah.
I just think, that gives you such a formidable 1-2 punch on the left side.
Actually, Morrissey only has 3 years left after this year.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I was a few years ahead, but regardless, you would have Samberg and, well, I mean, I'm just assuming Morrissey's going to be re-signed, right? So he'll be long-term Jet, right? But yeah, for me, I like, again, I'm not the general manager, obviously, but if I was the general manager, I would definitely have no problem signing Samberg to an 8-year deal. And I imagine the chat would agree with that, because he's been so solid this year when he's been healthy on the second pair.
And as you mentioned, you forgot to mention the time that his mom was on watching him on the Illegal Curve at Moose end of season roundtable, and she petitioned to be brought on his father-son Lake of the Woods fishing trip.
Right.
And we found out later on that he actually was, he ended up taking his mom on the trip. So she petitioned on our one of our shows a few years back when he was still a member of the Manitoba Moose. But let's really focus on Gabriel Vilardi. Let's dial in on him a little bit, because as Murat talked about with us, when you posed him that question that you and I wanted to have a conversation about today, and after we're going to have a little conversation about this, then we're going to bring Ross Levitan on in about 15 minutes to talk, kind of get that Senators Jets game teed up. Ross, of course, works for 680 CJOB, but from your
and Global News, he's on TV now as well.
He is a fancy guy on Global. We'll definitely give him a shout out in that regard. But Gabriel Vilardi is 25 years old. He is making $3.4375 this year. He is an
wow, what a bargain.
Yeah, and he's an RFA with Arb rights in this upcoming summer. So you talk about your GM hat. I'm going to ask Ezzy this question, but I'm also asking the chat this question. And, we'll throw your comments up on the board. But what kind of contract are you giving him? Do you have anybody in mind that's a comparable for you that you could say, well, here's a guy who signed a contract, who's similar trajectory to Vilardi, and maybe one his camp will use versus the Jets camp. What do you see as a reasonable contract to sign for a guy who, as Murat outlined, has had injury problems in his career?
Absolutely. Dating back to his time with the Los Angeles Kings and in the Ontario Hockey League, he had some injury issues. But I've mentioned this comparable before, Dave, because it's an easy comparable. He was drafted 10th overall in 2017, whereas Vilardi was drafted by the Kings 11th overall. That's Owen Tippett. He was signed to a contract in the summer by the Philadelphia Flyers. It was 8 years. I've got it up here. 8 years, $49.6 million. So that's a $6.2 million AAV. Now, Owen Tippett and Gabe Vilardi aren't direct comparables. Like, okay. I shouldn't say they're not direct comparables. I think they can be direct comparables. They're not the exact type of player, but I think they're both offensive-minded players. I think because of the year they were drafted and because of their points per game and everything like that, and their, like you said, Dave, their trajectory. So I think if you look at a guy like Owen Tippett, I think that's a decent comparable. I should mention I haven't gone through 32 teams and looked for tons of comparables.
This is more just as you were just. I mean, the reality is it's just an initial conversation,
right? And I was looking for other comparables. It's tough to find comparables because of the fact that I think not everyone is expecting Vilardi, Dave, to sign an 8-year deal. Mm-hmm. So I think, though, back to what we were talking about earlier with Murat, I think if we're going to be conservative and say that the Jets are going to sign him to, let's say, a 4 or 5 year deal, which would be in the mid-range, because let's be honest, it's not going to be a bridge deal. It's not going to be a 1-year deal. No. I believe that the Jets are going to want to sign him somewhere in the 4 to 8 year range. So let's go with 5 years. I think you're probably looking at, in the $5.5 million a year range to $6 million, just based on if you're using Owen Tippett's contract as a comparable. Because if you're going 8 years, then you're getting into $6 to $6.5 million a year, maybe even in the high sixes, Dave, closer to $7 million. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I have absolutely, zero concerns about signing him to a 4 or 5 year deal is because of the impact he's had on the top line and the power play specifically. Yeah. I mean, Gabe Vilardi has turned into one of the more dangerous players in the entire league on the power play. And I have no problem saying that because the Jets have the second best power play in the NHL. Or last time I checked, they have the second best power play in the NHL, right? The Devils, I think, are still number one. Regardless.
I actually think the Jets overtook.
Are they number one?
I think the
Okay,
Jets,
so let's go.
I
Let's
think
go with
actually
number
the
one.
Jets took it back actually, but
Okay.
I'll look it up while you're talking.
Okay, so it's they're regardless they're number one or number two, right? So they've got a top two power play, and Gabe Vilardi, and this was broken down by our friends Connor Hrabchak and Liz Hood on the Winnipeg Sports Talk deep dive.
Yeah,
the fact that Gabe Vilardi, with his size, what he's able to do, the net front presence, what he's able to do with those hands, whether he's around the goal line, whether he's in the bumper position, he's got a great shot. So I just think that Gabe Vilardi, based on what we've seen this year, I think, and the fact that he's such a nice complementary piece to Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele, and the fact that he's been able to stay healthy, I think is reason enough for me to give him a 4 or 5 year contract. Now, if the Jets, if Chevy decides that he wants to sign Vilardi to an 8-year contract, I think that would be fantastic, and I have no problems with that. I think the only concern would be that in the past he's had some injury problems. It hasn't been a problem this year. So it'll be really interesting to see going forward, what happens here, because I think that there's a lot of mutual interest between the player and the club to get something done. Obviously, we're not saying that a contract is imminent, but I think that,
breaking news.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I mean, put it this way, Dave, I think if we were to, go back to the beginning of the season and what everyone's expectations were for Vilardi, I think that, he has definitely at least matched and perhaps exceeded those expectations. So I think, and this is a very important contract for the Jets, right? Like, we talk about often, what's coming down, what's in the pipeline. Well, we see Braden Yager, captain for Team Canada. He's obviously a guy who's going to be in the Jets lineup sooner rather than later. Not this year, but in the next few years, he's going to be in the lineup, right? You've got guys like Brad Lambert, Nikita Chibrikov, Colby Barlow, right? Like, these are the guys that are going to be playing for the Jets. And we can get down to the Kevin Hees and the Kieran Waltons and everything like that. But right now, Gabriel Vilardi has established himself as a legitimate, bona fide first line right winger who can play on your top power play unit, and not just play on your top power play unit, be a dangerous weapon on your top power play unit. So I think, if you want to go back even further to when the Jets acquired him in the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, Dave, I think he's exceeded everyone's expectations of him. I really do. He's on pace for, what is he on pace for, 70 or 75 points this year?
Yep.
And, some people, talk about his, lack of foot speed, or, sometimes defensively, there's more to be desired. I can hear that. But I still think that overall, he's a guy that you want to lock up to at least 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, Ez, and I think that it all factors in, right? I mean, it's about a player's desire to be in this location. I mean, the Jets have given him a phenomenal opportunity, right? When the LA Kings really didn't, and he talked about playing under Todd McClellan, who, of course, we should mention got a new gig coaching the Detroit Red Wings after they made a coaching change. But this is a player who has been given a lot. He's been given a lot of opportunity here in Winnipeg to play healthy, but to play a top role. And, while there's been calls to break up that top six, or mix up the top six a little bit more, we've seen what, especially Vilardi, Scheifele, and Connor.
Did you see what they did against Toronto? I don't think.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't mean like recently. I just mean like there were, earlier. And now you've got those guys really humming along and playing, a contribution hockey almost every single night and every single game. And like you said, it's not just at 5-on-5. It's also, of course, on the power play. And he's a big factor to why they have. And I fact checked it and I was right. It is the number one power play. And you're right.
The Devils and the Jets have been flip flopping.
Yes. I was going to say, right? we're talking like it's 32.1%, which is a ridiculous number for the Jets, and 31.2% for the New Jersey Devils. And then the next closest team is the Tampa Bay Lightning at 27%. So the Jets and Devils, you're right, Ezzy. It's like you score one. If you get one, they don't, then it'll flip flop. But at the end of the day, it is a great discussion, because you do wonder to me, what makes kind of a lot of sense, because you do worry long-term, how's his body going to hold up? And, Brent Bellamy, one of the commenters, of course, architect here in Winnipeg. I don't know why I mentioned that he's an architect, but as he usually does, as he usually throws in some of his architecture references.
Shout out to Number 10 Architecture. That's who Brent works for.
Yeah, yeah. But what I was going to say though is that the injuries have been a lot of unrelated injuries. They're not like one thing specific that have continually hampered his ability to play. And so, like I said, but at the same time, and I think I put it up from Aaron, is he a kind of player who's going, because he's had a number of things go wrong, will he age faster maybe than traditional? And those are all going to be things that Kevin Cheveldayoff and Larry Simmons and Craig Heisinger, they're all going to have to factor in when they're making their determination as to what type of contract they want to offer him. But I do think it's food for thought, along with Dylan Sandberg, that these are things you have to really consider, because, this is a guy, I saw it in the comment, I think from, I don't remember who said it, but this is the guy you got for Patrick Laine. And I know the Kings have moved on, and there's been, Patrick Laine has been traded a bunch of times from Columbus. Now he's in Montreal, not making any friends in Columbus, I will say, but that element of it has moved forward and moved on. But from a Jets perspective, Patrick Laine was your second overall pick. It's the highest pick you've ever made in the 2.0 era. And so, do you want to be able to retain that and in a significant way and be able to still get some usage out of such a high pick?
Well, don't you also have to factor who else the Jets have on right wing?
Yes, right? That is for sure.
And the uncertainty with, Nikolai Ehlers, right? Like you have to factor this in as well. Alex Iafallo is a pending unrestricted free agent. He's obviously a guy that can play both the left side and the right side, but I think this is what you have to factor in, right? Like you've got your superstar left winger in Kyle Connor. You've got your superstar center in Mark Scheifele. I think, with this uncertainty surrounding Nick Ehlers, and we already talked about it. We talked about it with Murat. We've talked about it many times. We all want the Jets to sign Ehlers, but life isn't about what you want, right? There's a reality. Even though the salary cap is going to be going up, Dave, we just don't know. I mean, right. Murat knows more than just about anybody when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets, right? Like whether you're talking about with the Free Press, Mike McIntyre, Kenny Weeb, Murat, like these guys are dialed in with the team more than anybody. And he said himself, really, he doesn't know, right? Like Ehlers could be signed or he could be traded for a center. He could be traded for a defenseman, right? So with the uncertainty surrounding Ehlers and some other UFAs, I mean, obviously, when you're talking about guys like Alex Iafallo and Mason Appleton's the right winger on the third line. Mason Appleton is a third line guy. He's a third line, fourth line guy, right? So obviously, whether he comes back or not, we're not talking about a big amount of money, right? Like Appleton's going to be a guy that, maybe he's having a good year. I'm not taking anything away from Appleton.
No, for sure.
The pride of Wisconsin. He's having a good year. But when you're talking about Gabe Vilardi, you're talking about a guy who right now is on pace for 70 or 75 points. And this is a guy who's only 25 years old. So there's a lot of good hockey to come for Gabe Vilardi. So it's going to be really interesting to see, what kind of contract he signs. And we had the comment up earlier, people talking about, Vilardi and whether he likes playing in Winnipeg. I mean, you watch Vilardi scoring goals on the power play. I mean, looks like to me he's having a good time. So, I mean, obviously I haven't talked to him personally, Dave, about, how much he loves Assiniboine Park and the Forks and the Human Rights Museum. Like I haven't talked to him about how much he likes playing and living in the city. But, all indications are that, he does like playing here. So I know maybe we are looking at, a longer term contract, even if that means maybe 6 years as opposed to, a 4 or 5 year deal. But I think he's an integral piece of the Jets' future. Like I said, the Jets have some nice prospects coming through with Brad Lambert, Chibrikov, Braden Yager, Colby Barlow. But these guys aren't going to have the same type of impact that Gabe Vilardi's having right now. Like you've
guys are 20, 21, 22.
Exactly.
Right?
So you're seeing Lambert and Chibrikov. And obviously, I think Lambert played pretty well. I think I would say that Chibrikov was more impressive than Lambert was playing in that top 6 role.
Yeah.
So I absolutely am penciling in Chibrikov into the Jets' top 12 next year, Dave. Like, all things being equal. But I mean, you're not expecting Chibrikov to put up the type of numbers that Gabe Vilardi's putting up right now. You're not expecting Brad Lambert.
I don't know. I think Chibrikov scores pretty much every game, so I wouldn't slag him just yet. I know.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, I'm a big fan of Chibi. You know that, Dave. But I just think, when you have a player who has done exactly what you've asked of him and more, and Gabe Vilardi has, I think you reward him. I really do. And that's why, I won't be surprised if it's, we mentioned Owen Tippett earlier, who got an 8-year contract from the Philadelphia Flyers. Again, I'm not predicting it. Everybody knows my predictions are crap. So I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that the Jets are going to sign him. I'm just saying I won't be surprised if the Jets sign him to an 8-year deal. But I am with Murat. I'm expecting it most likely to kind of be in the 5-year range.
Yeah, I agree. I would. My early conjecture will be, or speculation will be, 5 to 6 years for when those two sides come together and sign a deal. Of course, when they do, we'll have it for you covered on illegalcurve.com or here on either the Illegal Curve Hockey Show or the Illegal Curve Postgame Show, both of which you're getting today on this Super Saturday. We are talking Jets. We're talking Senators. We're going to have Ross Levitan join us after the break. So we're going to head to commercial sponsor, and then we're going to spend some time talking about those red hot Ottawa Senators with Ross Levitan of 680 CJOB and Global News. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Dave Minuk, Ezzy Ginsberg. We're commercial free as for the rest of this broadcast. We're going to bring in our friend, Ross Levitan.
Just your friend, not good friend?
Well, he's a good friend. He's a friend. I didn't see him in Hawaii this year like last year. So, I mean, it's a little different, but
wow, must be nice, guys.
He has different priorities this year because he's got a new bundle of joy that he's got to look after.
Yeah, fellas, great to be back with you. One Anthem game Saturday night. Like nothing better than that, eh?
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's nothing better than Canada Life on a Saturday night. Should be a sold out game against the Ottawa Senators. Ross, usually we reference you as 680 CJOB's Ross Levitan, or more recently, we're seeing you on Global News up on the big screen on the TV.
A little scary, hey boys?
No, I felt like a proud dad watching you on Global News. I was just thinking to myself, how is Ross even more handsome? And just wondering, how the amount of handsomeness on my screen. But anyways, you're doing an awesome job on Global.
I thought
Ross.
I did okay, and then a thing of makeup showed up at my desk day too. I said, uh-oh.
That's amazing. Well, but you're also with the Locked On Senators podcast, and you also cover all things Ottawa, of course, having hailed from that region. You're now living in Winnipeg, but Ross, and I'm not going to say that and congratulations. Of course, you welcome a new member of the family to the Locked On Senators crew. And the Senators have gone on a run. I believe I saw you tweet that since you added that new member of the fam. But from your perspective, and I know we're going to get into the goaltending that's going on with them and everything else, but what has kind of got things turned around that I think I saw Bruce Garriock mention it, that this is the first time since 16-17 the Senators are in a playoff spot either this late in the season or at Christmas time.
Oh yeah, well, it was this late in the season in early December when they jumped back into that. Like it's been a complete grind through Novembers of years past. That's really been the Sens' undoing, and they were below 500 again in November this year. So it took that big turnaround that started the day my daughter was born. They're 10-3-1 since, and they were 0-4-1 in the weeks leading up to that. They were just really struggling to get anything done. The thing is, though, in those games, the underlying numbers were showing that this was a better team than the results would show. There's a little bit of fragility, I would say, about the way the team played down certain games. When things would get tight, they'd fold. They've been able to flip the script on that. They've got 3 overtime wins over the last 10 games, with wins over Pittsburgh, Calgary, and Vancouver in extra time. So they're learning how to play in these high intensity games where one mistake can cost it either way. So that's been the biggest turnaround. Like you look at it, and over this 10-3-1 streak, they're 8-2 in their last 10. But since November 25th, the Senators' top scorer is 31st in the National Hockey League. It's not like in Winnipeg where Kyle Connor's top 5, where you have an offensive juggernaut carrying you in certain areas. They're getting contributions from all throughout their lineup. They got 5 points in their last 9 games from Nick Cousins in a bottom 6 role. They're finding different ways to win games, but it all really comes down to Linus Ullmark. We know in this market that Connor Hellebuck can win games by himself, and Linus Ullmark was doing just that. It's unfortunate, went down with what we hope is a minor injury in the game against Edmonton, but he's 8-0-1 in his last 9 starts. Like he's been doing it all in the crease for Ottawa. So that's the number one reason why things have turned around in the nation's capital.
Ross, is it confirmed yet if Matt Sogard is getting the start? Because I was following Bruce Garriock and Tim Baines, and I was seeing that they were leaning towards Matt Sogard. So do we know yet? And a second part of that question, I guess, how would you assess his play, this year? Because, he's a guy people will see the name Matt Sogard, former second round pick of the Sens. but Dave will know this. He covers the AHL as much as anybody. He had a good season last year for Belleville.
Yeah, he did. He's also an awesome guy. I got to catch up with him when the Belleville Sens were here. He traveled with the team but didn't play. And said he went to Thermia with Nikolai Ehlers. Said he couldn't get 2 steps without them. Someone catching their attention, just wanted to talk hockey. Nothing, over the line. He was so taken aback by how people here just wanted to talk hockey all the time. Obviously,
did they do the cold plunge?
Well, I'm not sure, but I was telling him, I was like, buddy, you're not hiding from anyone. 6'7", right? Like he's just going to be, a figure wherever he is, including in the crease. And it's unfortunate he's been battling some injuries this year. I honestly felt he was way rushed to the NHL. It was obviously not his fault, but it was a year where both Ottawa Senators goaltenders got injured. Anton Forsberg tore both his MCLs. And then you had, I believe it was Cam Talbot that year. It's been such a revolving door. It's hard to keep track of which goalie was brought in that year to fix everything. But Matt Sogaard ended up playing 22 games that year. And there were some where he looked fine and others where he's getting beat over the shoulders. And as a 6'7" guy, it's tough to really kind of come to grips with. Although it did happen to Ben Bishop back in the day too. He turned out okay. But I just think it's about consistency for Matt Sogaard. And according to TSN 1200 this morning, good Winnipeg boy, Dean Brown, who's the play-by-play voice, he's running that account. And it looks like Sogaard is in the starters end. I would have been cool with either way. Levi Merilainen's played decent in his couple NHL games this year. Funny enough, he was the draft pick that Ottawa got back for Dylan DeMello in that trade years ago. So they used that on Merilainen. And one of those moments too, I know you guys know this at the draft, where all the analysts are like, yeah, never heard of him. No idea who he is. So we were curious about Merilainen. He's a good goalie, though. He led the league in Finland in shutouts 2 years ago, then came over and has been playing in Belleville. But for Mads, if you're going to the game tonight, you're going to know in the first 5 minutes whether he's going to be on his game or whether it's going to be a long night or a short one if he doesn't even make it through the first period.
Now, Russ, got to ask you about Claude Giroux. I mean, he's such a it seems like well-liked veteran, and he wanted to be there. He's fourth in team scoring. What kind of impact is he having on a relatively young Senators roster?
I love Claude Giroux. Just the competitiveness that he brings to the game is what catches your attention right away. First in the league in faceoff percentage, first in the league in shorthanded faceoff percentage. I think he snapped back like 18 of his last 21 draws while they're on the kill. And that's been a huge other part of the turnaround here is their penalty kill. I think it's 15 for its last 16, if I'm not mistaken. But they've really kind of turned things around from being middling to start the year. And he's a huge part of that. Now, with him, even at his MVP-like caliber earlier in his career, he was never the fastest guy, always a very cerebral player. He honestly, we call him like a poor man's Alfie in Ottawa. Like, he's got a lot of the same characteristics that Daniel Alfredsson has with the competitiveness. He also loves to stop up when he gets into the zone and kind of scan and look for the right play. The one thing about Claude Giroux, and it's perfectly fine if you add speed on the other wing, but right now they're trying to figure out how to utilize him and Tim Stützle together. Stützle plays center, like only center during the game, but he takes like 2 faceoffs a game. He's like one of the worst faceoff guys in the National Hockey League. So they have Claude Giroux playing right wing, but he takes all of his faceoffs for him. That to say, Stützle's the most dynamic player, the fastest player on the team. And when they have Giroux on one wing, and then they've used a lot Adam Gaudette, who's one of the great stories in the league, 13 goals making league minimum, thought he was going to start in Belleville, but now it's going to be Brady Tkachuk tonight. Also, great player, but not the fastest guy. So what we're trying to figure out is how can you make Tim Stützle the best superstar he can be? And that's probably adding a little bit more speed. Like, I look at Nikolai Ehlers as like the potential perfect line mate for a guy like Tim Stützle, but they don't have that in the lineup right now. They've got a lot of, I'd say, heavy grind down low type wingers and then speed down the middle. Their 3 fastest forwards are all down the middle. So a long way of saying that Giroux's speed at times has been a bit of a concern at the growing age of 37 now, but the elite hockey IQ, the competitiveness, and the face-off ability is still putting him in a very solid top 6 contributor role.
Ross, I just want to stick with Tim Stützle here for a second, because obviously, a few years back, he had the 91 point season. And, he's been in the NHL, I think, for 5 years now. People forget he's only 22 years old, just as an aside, right? And I think you'd agree with this. Like, to me, like, when I watch him play, this guy looks like a future 110, 120 point guy. Like, he's that good. Like, and I'm sure you've got this question, and you guys have talked about this on Locked On Senators. You watch the Senators obviously a lot more than Dave and I do, but like, does he get enough credit for how good he is? Because, often we talk about Kyle Connor being underrated, right? And obviously, Toronto's the center of the universe, so you hear a lot about Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews. But like, does he get enough credit for just how? I think people know he's good, but like, do people really like give him enough credit for just how good he is? Because, like I said, I mean, he seems like 100 plus point guy going forward for many years to come.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned Toronto there, because I think that they've almost like hijacked a bit of his resume a little bit in Toronto and Montreal, where Tim Stützle early in his career, he had trouble staying on his feet, and he got a bit of a notion, and Brendan Gallagher called him out in the media for being a diver. So now whenever people see Tim Stützle, they just say, oh, is he diving again? Is he doing this, doing that? He had 90 points as a 20-year-old in the National Hockey League. Like, that is outrageous. The list of players to do that since the lockout in 04-05 is Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, Steven Stamkos, and Tim Stützle. That's the whole list. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Stützle's the only non-first overall pick to be in that list. Like, him going third is a blessing that the Ottawa Senators at the time needed. They were, for my money, the worst team in the league that year. They got the 5th pick, and then it was with the pick they got back from the Erik Karlsson trade that ends up being Tim Stützle, because Martin Jones couldn't stop a puck in San Jose all year. So Ottawa got really lucky with getting him, and you'll see him tonight, man. Like, the way that when he gets the puck, he picks up speed, to me, is his number one asset. And also he loves doing this move in the offensive zone where he'll wheel, but he'll pull his arm out as long as he can and try to stretch it out, and then make a quick kind of snap pass from there and catch people off guard. He is extremely skilled. And again, I think that once he gets into a more comfortable spot in the lineup, I think we'll see more and more from him. I don't hate him playing with Tkachuk and Giroux. I like him playing with one of the two, but I'd like to see a little bit more speed on his line. But we'll see if he can drive it himself, because when Josh Norris, and Shane Pinto are all in the lineup, the Sens are 41, 21, and 3 all time. The only problem is between Pinto's suspension last year for 41 games, 2 shoulder surgeries for Josh Norris, and a shoulder surgery for Pinto, they just haven't had their top 3 centers in the lineup for long periods of time.
Ross, back in 2020, I know that a lot of Jets fans, and I think the team itself, were very interested in a guy named Jake Sanderson from Montana, and there was a lot of interest. Of course, he went 5th overall to the Senators. What's he looking like in his 3rd full season now in the NHL? Because he's again, like I said, a lot of folks around these parts had their eye on him. And I'm just curious to know how his development path has gone with a very, like I said, a young Senators team.
Well, how about that being the same draft class, right? You get Stützle at 3, you get Sanderson at 5, you get Ridley Gregg at 28, you get Tyler Klevin, another North Dakota product, at 44, and Levi Merulainen at 62. Even Cole Reinhardt, former Brandon Wheat King, was the 6th round pick. There's going to be 6 players from the 2020 draft class in Ottawa's lineup tonight. Like, that, to me, it really did push the rebuild in the right direction. And Jake Sanderson, like, look, I got to be nice to a Winnipeg native, but Travis Hamonic will probably tell you, if you gave him some truth serum, he's not a top 4 defenseman on a good NHL team anymore at his age. And that's fine. To me, he's a 6'7" guy, but with Artem Zub out long-term with a fractured foot, Nick Jensen, who's been amazing this year, he's basically Dylan DeMello a little bit, where he's not the most physical guy, but he's never in the wrong spot, always seems to be a plus whenever he's on the ice. He's really helped Thomas Chabot become the defenseman a lot of Sens fans knew he could be. So that leaves you where it's like, hey, if we don't want to disrupt this pair, I guess we'll just move Travis Hamonic up into Zub's spot. And I think that's really hurt Jake Sanderson's development, because he's now looking over his shoulder and double checking, hey, is this guy in the spot he's supposed to be? It's wild to see too. I know plus minus isn't everything. I'm not going to preach plus minus, but when you sort it by that, the pair of Thomas Chabot and Nick Jensen is plus 13 or plus 14, and the pair of Sanderson and Hamonic is minus 13. So when you're that far apart, top and worst on your team, there's got to be a little bit of something to that. Now, Sanderson, he's silky as a skater. His dad was the same way. If you remember Jeff Sanderson back in the day, he's going to be a star in this league. I just think that right now it's about him kind of learning the trade before the tricks of the trade. Eventually that'll all come. I see 60-point upside from him. He is still on pace to shatter his career high in points. I think it's only like 34 or 36. so far. I think he's on pace to get about 40 or 45, but we're looking for him to kind of be one of those guys who steps up here in the second half of the season, because he's been good, but not great. And obviously a 3-point night last Saturday against Vancouver obviously helped out his offensive numbers too.
Ross, I'm almost, as I'm preparing to ask you a question, I'm almost hesitant to ask you about the Brady Tkachuk trade rumors. But I mean, let's be honest, we don't have you on often enough that I can't ask you this question. So I mean, with the whole Brady Tkachuk trade rumors to the New York Rangers, tampering, I wasn't following it closely enough to really know like what that meant in terms of tampering. But the question I wanted to ask you is this something that is even something that in Senators Nation people are still talking about? Like, has the recent 8-2 in the last 2 games, like all of the wins, are people talking about this less? Like, what is your whole take on this? Because like I look at Brady Tkachuk and I'm like, this should be a guy who's a Senator for life, right? Like, he's everything you want in a hockey player, in a leader, right? Like, what's your whole kind of take on the Brady Tkachuk to New York trade rumors?
Well, notice they came out of New York. Nobody in Ottawa even gives that any mind. Brady Tkachuk is not only an amazing player and a guy who wears the C for good reason in Ottawa. If you know anything about what he does off the ice, this guy is the perfect ambassador for Ottawa. He truly loves being in Ottawa. And I get it. Look, his dad wanted out and got out of Canada. His brother got out, wanted out of Canada. I truly believe that with Brady Tkachuk, he believes in legacy and he wants to be a part of what gets the Ottawa Senators back to a franchise that's worth talking about. Like, I think he takes that very personally. He's a lot more, I think, introspective than maybe his sibling, who's very brash and outspoken. I think Brady is the type of guy who any team would want to have, and I think that's where the trade rumors come from, because they're shot down every time right away. Like, and you could tell how frustrated they were when the Sens PR guru Ian Mendez is tweeting out the definition of whopper, which is the word that the writer in the Rangers, it's like a falsehood or a fairy tale. It's in the thesaurus. So I thought that was hilarious. It was like a full-on blitz from the organization, from the owner coming out and defending him. And look at the record since they defended their captain. Like, I just thinking, look, I'm not here to talk ill of the dead or anything like that, but the new ownership in Ottawa is such a breath of fresh air that I hear people say like, oh, Brady's not going to be okay with another losing season. He's going to want out. I truly believe that the entire clock reset with the new owner. I truly believe that anything in the past is just seen as 1.0, and now we're on to a new evolution of what things are going to be. They just built a brand new gym for the players. They're investing in the rink, even though they're trying to build a new one. So they're showing like, hey, look, we're trying to build this in the future, but you're going to be here for a couple of years, and we're not going to, nickel and dime it. We're going to make sure that we're putting out a proper NHL product for you guys as a facility. And I think that speaks a lot to the players, the way that he's defending them in the media, the way Steve Staios made changes around his roster this summer, but didn't touch the core. And I think that spoke volumes to his belief in Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, Drake Batherson, and to a lesser extent, Shane Pinto. And then on the back end, Shabbat and Sanderson as your pillars. And he's like, look, I believe in you guys. And I think that the players now understand that the onus is on them. And if Brady is all of a sudden going to be gone, that's just dodging responsibility. And I don't see Brady Tkachuk as that kind of guy. You see him around the rinks. He's always chatting with minor hockey kids. He's always doing things. He's got the Boys and Girls Club sponsorship that he's partnered with in Ottawa. Like, this guy is the perfect ambassador. And then to top it off, there's no hockey player like him. Of players that have more than 30 points this year, who's even close in hits? I think Brady's 5th in the league in hits. He's an absolute animal on the ice. And some people say he fights too much, or he does this, he does that. He's always doing it to stand up for his teammates. It's never selfish. And you saw him in Calgary last week, boys, where takes a high stick to the face, gets 9 stitches, loses a tooth. And it was the day that the Amazon thing came out, where it's like, we're going to do a behind the scenes and Brady's the guy. I posted on Twitter, I said, the Amazon storyline is him coming back and scoring the game winner. And wouldn't you know it, he does just that. So, yeah, that's a long-winded way, but I'll be wearing my Brady Tkachuk jersey at the game tonight. Like, this guy is all time, and I hope he's a Senator for life.
I'm glad to hear that, because like I said before, he seems like a guy who should be a Senator for life, right? Or at the very least, he should play the majority of his career in Ottawa. So Ross, music to my ears.
Yeah, good, man. Good. Yeah, he's a stud, man. And just the way he scores goals, the passion that he has, like, we watched this guy grow up from being 19, and he looked like Bambi out there. He had so much strength, but he couldn't stay on his skates. It's like, yeah, he's fun. And you guys probably remember, not to twist the knife, obviously you guys made playoffs, we didn't, but it was last year, 2 minutes left in the game. Brady Tkachuk scores the winner here in Winnipeg. And I'm sure you guys know his mom's side of the family's all from here. So after he scored that goal, we had Brady on Locked On Sens in the summer, and he confirmed it. He was pointing at his grandpa up in the stands right after scoring that goal. So Brady's always bringing a little extra juice when he comes to Winnipeg.
I was actually just gonna mention that. I was gonna say I remember him hitting the boards because his grandfather was sitting there, and so right after he scored, and actually our photographer Colby Spence actually had a phenomenal photo of him up against the glass after he happened to be right there.
Awesome. We caught up with, we just called him Mr. Oster in the concourse on the way out. And I was like, you see Brady pointing? He's like, oh, he did that for himself, not for me. I was like, come on, don't sell yourself short like that. That's awesome.
Well, you know what? Just we'll finish it off here, Ross. But just in terms of, you know, what are you looking for? I mean, what is it going to be a sign that the Senators are ready to handle a Jets team that feeling good about themselves? Obviously, hit some changes on the back end here in Winnipeg with the week-to-week injury to Hayden Fleury. Of course, we now know from the optional morning skate that it'll be a pairing of we think Heinola and Stanley. At least those will be the ones playing. So, from your perspective, if watching the game. Take off the fan hat, put on the analysis hat, but just in terms of, you know, the Senators, what would you look for to see them know that, okay, they're ready to play against the Jets team that's going to come out ready to go?
Well, Matt Sogard is first goalie off the ice too, so all signs point towards him getting his first start of the season. He played a game. You guys might remember it from Canadian Thanksgiving. Ottawa beat LA 8-7 in Ottawa. Anton Forsberg got pulled early. I was at that game home for Thanksgiving, and it was just nobody could make a save. Darcy Kemper couldn't make a save. Forsberg couldn't. Sogard couldn't. But, hey, he's 1-0 this year with, I think, a 6.9 goals against and a .630 save percentage. But he's 1-0, baby. So, look, I'm just hoping that he can show up early in this game, allow a little bit of confidence for the rest of the team to get going. It's been a long break for both teams. So the first 10 minutes, I'm curious whether it's going to be one where it's like 2-1 in the first 10 minutes, or if the teams are going to be feeling themselves out, playing a lot of neutral zone time. We'll see about that. I'm going to be looking. The last stat that I want to let everybody know about, because it is wild, because if you just sort NHL.com by power play, you're like, oh, Ottawa's got a really good power play. I think they're sixth in the league. They're second in the league at home, and they're 27th on the road. Their road power play just cannot convert for whatever reason. So I think that's something I'm going to be watching for tonight, is if Ottawa's power play can get them a couple goals. I believe that goal we just talked about from Brady was on the power play. Could be wrong, but I think it was. So I'm just looking for the power play and the goaltending, and how Ottawa's going to protect the house in the high danger areas to not allow Mads Sogard to go kind of off the deep end. Because that's kind of what's happened with him, is if he lets in one bad one, all of a sudden it's a second and a third that get by him. He's told us, he's like, I'm all between my ears right now. I really need to, he's working with a sports psychologist. So for him, if he starts feeling good, he can get into a groove and show why he was a second round pick in the NHL. So, hey, it's going to be a good one tonight. I was really hoping for Ullmark versus Hellebuck. I thought that would have been, a class goaltending matchup for a Saturday night hockey night in Canada, but it's always fun. It's once a year that the Sens are in town. So I'll obviously be, green light tonight at the CLC, but always appreciate you boys having me on, and really enjoy what you guys do for coverage of Winnipeg sports. So always happy to jump on, and hope you guys enjoy the game tonight.
Thanks, Ross. And then after party, as you mentioned, at Thermea with Matt Sogard and Nick Wheeler.
Yeah, or at CJOB. I'll be up there at 9:30 tomorrow morning. So I gotta I gotta be all set for the next day. That's what's 6 o'clock start. Nothing better than that, eh?
And we look forward to seeing you again on Global. Always, like I said, I felt like a proud father seeing you on Global. So you're killing it, my man.
Thanks, man. Monday, Tuesday, I'll be back.
All right, Ross. Well, that's Ross Levitan from Locked On Senators, from CJOB, from Global News. He is a multidisciplinary.
From around the block, just from down the street.
He's everywhere. Well, Ross, thanks a lot for bringing insight on the Ottawa Senators to today's Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Ezzy. Have a great day, guys.
Cheers.
Okay, you too. There he goes. That's Ross Levitan. Whew, Ez, where did 2 hours go? We just flew through today's Illegal Curve hockey
I'm
show.
excited for tonight's game. Ross just got me even more fired up to watch the Senators. This Senators team, I'm personally, maybe it's because there's a lot of Ginsbergs. My dad's side of the family, my grandfather's from Ottawa. So shout out to all the Ginsbergs in Ottawa.
Yeah.
But maybe it's because of that. Obviously, I'm hoping the Jets win. We're a Jets-based show, of course. But I mean, I want to see the Senators in the playoffs, Dave. Like, I'm one of those people that want to see them the most amount of Canadian teams in the playoffs. And specifically with Ottawa, they're always that underdog, right? Like, let's be honest. They're in a tough division. That Atlantic division is a tough division. Nobody's expecting them to battle, with the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers for first in that division, right? But I just think it would be nice, and they got a lot of nice players. Like that Tim Stützle is a hell of a player, obviously led by Brady Tkachuk. I always think Drake Batherson's a guy that doesn't get enough credit for how good of a player he is. You asked Ross about Jake Sanderson. Jake Sanderson's an absolute stud.
Whitefish, Montana, Ezzy.
Yeah, exactly. The hockey hotbed of Whitefish, Montana. But so the Jets are going to have their hands full tonight with the Ottawa Senators. I'm obviously not saying that the Jets can't win, but I'm just saying this Ottawa Senators team, I think they've surprised a lot of people this year.
They have indeed. Well, we don't surprise anyone because we just try and bring you consistent Illegal Curve coverage of the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and pretty much anything related to hockey here in Manitoba on our website, illegalcurve.com, and of course on our YouTube channel. So make sure you're subscribing, folks. Make sure you're smashing the like button. Make sure, Ezzy, you're leaving comments. I try and respond to as many as I can. I can't respond to all, but we appreciate that you take the time to spend, whether it's 2 hours on Saturday mornings or usually around an hour after every post-game show with us here as part of the Illegal Curve family in the chat. Sometimes you don't even participate in the chat. I've had people come up and say, hey, I love your show. I don't ever comment, and we appreciate you just as much as the commenters. But always good times here on Saturday morning, especially when there's plenty of mic time. Ezzy, he had a lot of mic time today. I had a lot of mic time. Any final thoughts, Ez, before we wrap things up?
You mentioned there was plenty of mic time without Mindell, but we've got a big Moose game coming up between the Moose and Texas Stars tomorrow at 2 p.m.
That's right.
So maybe we want to do this.
Put on your antlers. It's time for the Minuk Moose Minute on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Well, I don't have a ton of Moose news to relay other than the fact that, they're going to be absent one Dylan Coghlan, who's of course up for the next little while with the Winnipeg Jets. We will see actually the Moose practice today. Of course, I can't be at practice because I'm here doing the show, but the Moose at 10:30 this morning were on the ice. So we'll be curious to know, and we'll find out tomorrow, and you'll be there with Hockey Manitoba, you said, and I'll be there in the press box, but we'll find out if Elias Salamonson, who Mark Morrison, the head coach of the Manitoba Moose, told me, the Jets prospect, of course, from 2022, the second rounder, who is that right shot defenseman, who Murat, like I said, was talking about in a Dylan Samberg vein. He's still got some time to grow and learn the North American game, but there's a lot to like from what we've seen. It's just going to take some time for him to develop, of course, but he is a young up and coming guy on the right side. So we'll see if he's going to be available on the to play. But like I said, Mark Morrison, the head coach of the Moose, told me, I think it was last week or the week before, that the expectation was he'd be ready to return right after Christmas. So we'll see if that is the case. And like I said, we'll bring that to you on illegalcurve.com.
Is Danny Zhilkin any closer to coming back, by the way?
He's back. He's back.
He is back.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, he played his he's already played a couple of games. So I think a couple of games. Oh, KWB petitioning for Drew to take over the hosting duties?
$5. That's more generous. Usually Kenny's water bottle just throws us 50 cents. He's throwing around the $5 like it's nobody's business.
Well, he didn't need to throw that our way around. We appreciate it, of course. But like I said, the most important thing is for you folks to make sure you're liking these videos. Make sure you're sharing the videos. Share our stuff on Facebook. Go on Mastodon, True Social, Blue Sky.
Hold on a second. Is anybody actually on Mastodon?
Well, no, but I always mention Mastodon because Ezzy many years ago mentioned that he signed Illegal Curve up for a Mastodon account. And I'm like, what the hell is Mastodon?
Dave, I'll be honest. I have no memory of that.
I remember everything is. I'm like an elephant, so I don't forget. But the truth is that you did sign us up, I believe. I don't know. I never checked it out. We are, of course, on Blue Sky.
I don't think it's taken off, Dave.
It has not, but our Blue Sky is taken off. We're doing pretty well on that. I'm pretty sure we're the number one source for Jet stuff on Threads. # no big deal. And of course, we remain on Twitter. So make sure.
And Joe, for those listening on the podcast, Joe's on Mastodon, so give him a follow. Joe from Winnipeg. So he's keeping us proud on Mastodon there.
And Tico Napoli's asking about Chaz Lucius. Jets fans will be very happy to know the 2021 first rounder has been playing consistently. And so there's a lot of joy from that young man that he's back in the lineup and he's playing back-to-back games. He's been on the wing. He reminded me that that's something he did in college. So at the University of Minnesota, so there's a lot of good things that are coming up. I mean, I know the Moose are in tough right now. They're last in the Central, but the truth is they're not that far out of it, and they just need to start to turn it around, get some wins under their belt. Won't be easy with Texas in the building on Sunday, and then of course start your New Year's Eve early with an afternoon game. I think it's either a 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock start, but I think it's 2 o'clock. Maybe it's 4 I'm not entirely certain on Tuesday, where I will be at the Moose game, of course, and we'll be able to ring in the new year with me and Ezzy on the post-game show. But of course, we got to focus on the Jets and Senators. That's our focus right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to end the show. We're going to thank all of you for joining us on this Saturday morning. We're going to thank our sponsors in a second, and then we're going to remind you to have a great rest of your Saturday, and then you're going to come join Ezzy and I. And I believe Drew, he's most likely, but we're not 100% certain. We might not let him back in because we've done so well without him. But we'll be on after the Jets game and Senators game around 8:40 p.m. for the Illegal Curve post-game show.
You might see the clock again tonight because Drew's still in Kentucky.
Is he? I thought he was back today.
No, he's still there.
Who knew?
He's back tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, well, there you go. So then we might get Drew and the big clock from Kentucky. But for right now, a big thank you to all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the post-game show, the Saturday show, and the aforementioned website a million times, illegalcurve.com. A possibility they are in no particular order: Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Play Now, Holt Dental, Boston Pizza, City Place, Seagram's. Support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. Okay, guys, that's it for today's show. We went slightly into OT because of the Manuk Moose Minute, but that's okay. We have some time. I'm going to get working on the podcast right now. So folks who didn't get a chance to watch us live, even though you can watch the replay live on our YouTube channel, but I'm going to have the podcast available for download. Make sure, again, like I said, subscribe to us on YouTube, subscribe to us on Google, on iTunes, on Spotify. And we appreciate your support here of our programming. For Dave Manuk, for Ezzy Ginsberg, for Drew Mandel, who's not with us today, but he will potentially be with us tonight. We want to thank everyone for joining us here on today's Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We'll see you tonight around 8:40 p.m. for the Illegal Curve postgame show.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast from Illegal Curve Hockey. For more great Illegal Curve content, subscribe to the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, follow at Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit your online home for hockey in Winnipeg, illegalcurve.com.